Happy Monday, everybody. Welcome to Muse News, the show where we talk about all things MUN. I'm your host, Jacob Laybolt, and I'm the managing editor of the Muse. Our guest today is Devon Budden. He's the Executive Director of Advocacy with MUNSU, the student union representing undergraduates on St. John's campus. Welcome, Devon. How's it going?
I'm fantastic, gentlemen. How are you?
We're doing okay.
Doing
I'm
good.
doing pretty good. You know, it's that part of the semester where I feel like, I don't know, everyone's doing final projects, and I feel like everyone's kind of just at the end of their, I don't know, fuel tank. I don't know. Is that, I don't know.
Yeah.
Your advocacy, you're probably hearing from that a little bit, maybe. I don't know. We can get into that in event, but, like, I don't know. What do you think?
Absolutely.
How are you feeling with your organization? How are you guys doing?
I think everybody's definitely running on fumes to some extent. It's been a long semester, but, we're still going strong, keeping the issues at the forefront. MUNSU never stops.
Yeah. Specifically, too, one thing that we've heard about is housing is always kind of like a hot button issue for students.
Yeah.
And it frequently comes up in the news. A couple of days ago, former Muse editor-in-chief, now CBC reporter Jenna Head, wrote an article about MUN residents. What do you make of the fact that there are 120 beds in shared rooms that are vacant in Patton College?
I mean, the obvious answer there is, why aren't they filled?
Yeah.
Our director of ancillary operations, Bruce Belbin, also did a little media about that, and provided some of the reasoning. When we're in such a housing shortage and a housing crisis, it is absolutely disheartening to see so many empty rooms. But obviously, what is and what should be are two very different things sometimes.
Yeah. I think you recently did a housing survey, I think, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Could you tell us a little bit about that and how that went?
Yeah, I certainly can. So with the advocacy committee, we launched a housing survey. Essentially, we stratified it by on and off campus living. I will say a lot of the results that we got were expected, not necessarily a good thing. I'll pull it up here now. We did have quite a few respondents. We got right around 200, I think. And several different reports have been done at different times, so they all look different. One of the main things that we found, though, is that, conditions on residence are certainly better than what a lot of students find themselves off campus, but still not the best. We're obviously seeing lots of issues with rodents, lots of accessibility issues, specifically like the dining hall elevator got a lot of complaints in that survey.
Yeah.
So things are still rough across the board.
I was just going to say I got stuck in an elevator about like a week ago. That happens like at least once a month, I think. Like it's yeah, everyone I talk to whenever elevators come up, it seems to be just like this shared across the board. Everyone's got a problem with the elevators here. And they're always talking about those certificates in the elevator booths themselves that are like expired on safety inspections. So I don't know. Can I ask you too, like, how much of these concerns are these on campus or off campus housing surveys?
So I mean, where we did both, we got we've heard lots of concerns, obviously, from all sides. I would say the off campus is definitely a bit more concerning.
Right.
I would say, naturally there are a lot more students in situations where they have almost no agency. Landlords do tend to be abusive. We see international students getting picked on a lot, in various different ways. So, I would say all of the results were as expected, and they highlighted just how severe the housing crisis is right now.
Yeah. Director of Residence Bruce Belbin told CBC that it's, quote, "It is actually probably cheaper to live on campus in those single rooms with all the amenities than it would be to find a place within the confines of the city, which is within a 5-kilometer radius." What do you make of that claim?
That's an interesting one. I think right on a surface level, it's right. I would say to some extent, residence is cheaper, but if students can't afford $600 a month, they can't afford $1,000 a month. Housing is going to be a massive burden that they're going to have to endure anyways. And, res obviously isn't perfect. Still needs a lot of work. So I wouldn't say necessarily that just because it's cheaper means it's perfect or that it's an option for everyone.
Yeah. No, I think that's a good point. The other thing I want to get into too, just briefly, is the Westerland Apartments. They're accepting leases. What do you make of that development? Are you hearing anything from students? Are they happy with the leases that they're seeing? Is there a lot of communication that you're hearing from Westerland?
No. They've been somewhat involved with us, looking for us to kind of promote their stuff a little bit. Obviously, building housing is good. Any new housing is a net good. But when you're charging exorbitant prices that students can't afford, how good is it?
Sure.
And we are seeing students sign leases right now, a year out, right? The apartments aren't even built yet. Students are making huge commitments. I haven't read the lease agreements. I don't know what protections are in there. But it's certainly a little concerning and definitely something you need to keep your ear to the ground on, especially when you have a bunch of students who probably aren't experts in rental agreements, signing leases a year out for apartments that don't exist.
I was going to say, when I signed my first lease, I don't even think we understood what we were looking at. Like, I feel like the lease was just like, it was all legalese. We didn't really know. They're talking about damage deposits, and none of us had credit cards, and like we were just, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know. And I think like a lot of students are like that too. Like you're leaving home for the first time most of the time when you become a university student, unless you're a graduate student and you're coming here. But even then, like I think a lot of people are just getting into the housing market for their first time, and I think it can be very stressful. Having a landlord that probably doesn't understand your situation and is actively taking advantage of your contract, that's probably even worse. You said there were rodent problems, and what else were you kind of seeing between the landlords and tenants?
So between landlords and tenants generally, you see a lot of manipulation of lease agreements, a lot of landlords saying, oh, you have to leave based on these grounds or whatever.
Right.
When likely they know that the person living there isn't informed enough to argue against it.
Right.
Also see a lot of situations where, students who aren't happy with their living situation will try to take that agency and go ahead and move out, and then are stuck with 2 rental payments based on, various things. So I think the main issue is this entire model of student housing is incredibly predatory. It's built with the assumption that the people who are renting don't have the full access to be able to combat a lot of the issues that are being brought up. And I think that's the most concerning thing. We do obviously see a lot of infrastructure stuff, some mold in off-campus rodents, of course. Driveways are a big thing. A lot of international students and folks that don't have cars are being expected to shovel driveways and things like that, I've heard. So yeah, it's across the board. It's really exploitative.
Yeah, I know. Again, I don't know. I'm not going to name my landlords, obviously, but I feel like my first lease was a nightmare because they made us buy a lawnmower and then mow the property continuously. But like, we didn't know that going in, that we had to buy our own lawnmower and the gas and like all of that. And I think like, I don't know. I think like it just speaks to like the state of the housing market, that the purchase, like on the demand side, there's no leverage. Like it just seems kind of unbalanced. And I think too, we spoke about this, I think when we met in, was it September or October?
Yeah.
And you had mentioned that you had heard a lot of these complaints, but it seems to still be an issue. Would you say it's getting worse or better?
I'd say it's fairly standard. I can't say it's gotten worse.
Okay.
I've been in this role now for the fall semester for a good 3-4 months, with all the students back on campus, and the rate of people coming to me with these issues is pretty steady. Still sending lots of people for legal support. Yeah, but it's certainly, regardless of if it's increasing, decreasing, or staying the same, it's still a crisis. So,
the other thing I want to get into too is, I know the Fund MUN campaign is going on right now. Is student housing, is that part of the conversation when you're meeting with local leaders? Like, because I know I'm Nova Scotian and we just had our election.
Sorry.
The other day, they were talking about how one of the big election points was, we actually invested in student housing. And I think I was kind of surprised because I think I've been up here for a while. I don't hear local leaders talk about student units as much as I think I expected. Maybe has that come up in conversations at all?
So in MUNSU's meetings with political parties, it certainly has. In the Fund MUN space, not so much.
Okay.
Because the Fund MUN campaign, it runs so much deeper than students, right? Everything is for the students, but the people who are affected by it, faculty, per course instructors, it's hard across the board. And honestly, being in a student leadership role and then going into those meetings and hearing the struggles that the faculty are facing, when a lot of the time we want to just point blame and direct and be frustrated, they're hurting too. I can't imagine being in a position where your contract is inconsistent and your department keeps losing funding and you're trying to do everything you can to support students, and then you're still taking all of that criticism because you're deprived, right? All of that mismanagement comes from the top, and I think we've had a lot of really good solidarity now between the different unions across campus. So we haven't made residents a huge focus in those meetings. But of course, when we talk about fiscal responsibility, making sure people have a comfortable place to live is pretty implied. Yeah, I would think.
Okay. Yeah. The only reason I bring it up too is just because I worked at housing with student residents for a while, just like on and off, and that was one thing that they talked about was always like funding for that sort of part of MUN's operations, because it's such a huge part too. Like I think a lot of people who live off campus don't realize how much it goes on behind the scenes just to get the cafeteria running, the housing running, to have janitors cleaning the halls every morning. Like there's a lot of moving pieces. But I was just curious. So that doesn't seem to be as much of a prominent thing. But could you talk about the kind of the infrastructure problems that people are seeing on campus? We saw a couple of weeks ago with the social work ceiling tile. I don't know if you've probably seen that.
Yeah. I had our front desk person, Faisal, came into my office, and he looked at me and he said, "Dude, the ceiling just collapsed." And I was like, "What do you mean the ceiling collapsed?" I was like, "Do I need to run over there and help these people?" But I think that was just the. Obviously, it's very unfortunate and very embarrassing, but was kind of the perfect visual encapsulation of all the problems we've been having, for sure.
Yeah, and I feel like we're laughing because of how ridiculous it is.
100%.
Like it's not really justifiable that you are in a classroom trying to learn and you're trying to dodge ceiling tiles like it's Donkey Kong with bear. Like, do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
like it just doesn't. That's not a learning environment. I feel like that's a bit strange, but. So like that and the asbestos too. Are you hearing people talk about that? Like when I first came here, I didn't understand why there was asbestos everywhere. Because when I grew up, I don't know if you guys have ever watched Mike Holmes.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and if he sees asbestos, he shuts the whole thing down.
Yeah.
Like he says, like you can't. But like when I came here, it was like, oh, be careful, there's asbestos, or we're doing asbestos abatement in this room, or you know what I mean? And it was just like so shocking. I was just like, what? So like. Is that coming up?
Yeah. I mean, I think the hardest part for students is barring those who physically cannot get around because the campus isn't accessible in all parts.
Sure, yeah.
I think it's also really disheartening for students to have to walk around and see those asbestos signs and see, water dripping from the water.
Yeah, whatever unquote, that is,
dripping from the ceilings. Yeah. It is very concerning, and I think the lack of care to even just like the physical, visual space is really indicative of how far things have gone, and it's really starting to weigh on people.
Yeah. I think when you get to the point that the buckets are called munnel juice, that's probably where it's gone too far already.
You'd think.
Yeah, you would think that. Yeah. I guess just like one more thing I'll go into. University Apartments, the brand under Montreal-based company WorkLive. I don't know if do you know about that?
Yep.
They're making the prices of the apartments public, and we requested the price for their apartments. They haven't told us. This could be because they haven't finalized it yet, or because they want to reduce the chance of sticker shock. But we have heard from different people on estimates they've given. What do you know about the cost of these apartments specifically?
I know. Well, before I get into any numbers, it's dictated by how many people you're in there with, right? So it's incentivizing maximum people per apartment, which obviously brings on its own set of challenges. I've heard numbers kind of from 800 in the best of cases with like 4 roommates up to 12 to 1400 for 1 roommate or by yourself.
Yeah.
Obviously very exorbitant. It's a private firm at the end of the day. It's not like the Westerland apartments are being built by students for students. There's no solid student investment. They are a private firm. They're opening up housing, and given my experience so far with seeing how private firms have treated students, I'm not the most optimistic.
Okay. Yeah. I think we did talk about that too during our last meeting too. I had a few people read that article. They laughed because of the piece of advice that you gave. I think it was you gave 3 tips. And it was, do you remember this?
Yeah.
Yeah, I had people were like, that's good advice. But it was find, no. It was don't commit academic plagiarism, find your community and like your space and your people, and then don't commit academic plagiarism.
Yeah.
Is that getting better as we're moving into finals? Or would you like to bestow some wisdom to listeners who might be thinking about taking some shortcuts?
I have so much wisdom to bestow to students because of the way I've seen them get treated in the system. I think the most concerning thing right now is AI as a whole.
Sure, yeah.
Both, students trying to find ways to use AI to make their lives a bit easier, not necessarily to copy material, but, generating citations, fixing grammar. Those things are getting flagged by professors. We're also seeing a handful of instances where I would say professors are accusing students of using AI when they haven't. Maybe they've just got really straightforward writing. I don't know. But it's certainly becoming more of a hot button issue. I know the university is working on putting together a committee to try and combat it and to really understand like what's AI, what isn't, what's acceptable, what's not. But yeah, like ultimately the risk to reward ratio for using AI, I don't think is worth it. And
yeah,
of course, I want to sympathize with the fact that everybody's got really busy schedules. It is hard to get the amount of work done that you got to do.
Yeah.
But in any case, avoid drawing on that, please.
Yeah. No, I've been in group projects, even at the graduate level too, and I'm sure the GSU has far less resources for advocacy, I'm sure, but that's a conversation for another time. But the issue that I would say is just like, I think one of the problems with AI is people don't know what they're using. Yeah. If that makes sense. Like, they think it's like using a calculator, but it kind of prevents you from learning the sort of things you're supposed to be picking up in that course. I think it's different if, you've been working 2 jobs and like you've literally not had time to write your paper and it was a thing of desperation. But I think, don't do it.
Yeah.
That's not a good idea.
It's
Please
a terrible
don't.
idea.
Yeah. If you have the choice, do not use AI. That is a very silly thing to do. Is there anything else you want to plug?
Well, keep in touch. Advocacy door is always open. As things get sketchier in the world of housing and in the world of academics, resources are there for you. And that's something that I really can't preach enough. I didn't really know that I had a community at this university until I started to get involved, started asking questions, started wondering why things were the way they were. And it made my university experience that much better. So get involved, keep your eyes open. Also, we're headed into election season.
Yeah, that's right.
And folks, politics matter. And when you see our most conservative talking about how terrible down over the border is, don't let it fool you. People aren't always as pro-worker and pro-student as they might claim to be. So keep your eyes open, take care of your family. Read news, but not too much. Yeah,
that's a good point too. Don't gorge on it.
Yeah.
I don't know. I was listening to morning BBC News, and the like BBC World News Service just does like this roundup, and I had to stop listening to it because it was like I was doing it too much. It's too much news, and probably I don't know. Be careful with Twitter too, because that's kind of
it's fake news, folks. It's all fake.
Okay. Well, I think that's pretty much everything for today.